So good morning and welcome to Monkhouse on Mondays. Today I'm really honoured to be joined by Sue Anstiss. Sue is a trustee of the Women's Sports Trust, and today we're going to talk about women's sport because it's something that really interests me, having 3 daughters. But before we start, Sue, how are you feeling and what are you doing to stay active?
I'm feeling well, actually. Thank you for asking. Very pleased to be here with you today. Keeping active, so lots of dog walks. I've got a small dog, so constantly out, hitting 15,000 steps a day, which is good.
Wow. Yeah.
Got back into the river in the last week or so, which is lovely. So a little bit of open water swimming, and then I've discovered online yoga. I've never been a yoga person, but Adrian, big American yoga lady, free, amazing, fantastic. So I'm really enjoying that as well.
Good, excellent. Yeah, yoga and Pilates is something I've never really got into, but people seem to be very keen on. I think Chris Evans talks about her quite a lot on his radio show, doesn't he? Right. Okay, so let's talk about what you do then. Talk about what is the Women's Sport Trust and what's your role? What are you up to?
So Women's Sport Trust was created back just after 2012, really. So 2013 and coming 2012-13 on the back of the after the London Olympics, I guess, seeing all that amazing coverage and exposure for female athletes, really to raise the profile of athletes, so to make women's sport more viable. So funding and commercial funding, role models, and media awareness. So just making sure that women's sport was on the agenda, really. So it's been around 2012 was established.
Okay, excellent. You mentioned 2012, and I remember taking my daughter. We went to the Paralympics and we watched the first day of the athletics, and it was just fantastic. The feeling that gave us, that opportunity to do something different as a result. So it's really interesting to read the stuff that's coming out around women's sport at the minute, because COVID appears to have had a bit of an issue with women's sport. We've seen a lot of cancellations of some big events recently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with all these things, isn't it? Glass half full, half empty. I think I am anxious. I think we are cautious and anxious about women's sport being impacted more brutally, perhaps, and more quickly than some of the men's sports. With, again, today, the netball, the Vitality Super League cancelled yesterday. Tyrrell's sponsorship finished, not necessarily related to COVID, but for the Premier Rugby League. So things are changing, and women's sport not coming back perhaps in the way that men's has, in terms of there's not enough funding to be testing women in the FAWSL as there is in Premier League. But I'm also excited and optimistic about the opportunity too, because women's sport offers something very different to men's sport in that it's often more affordable. And more Nielsen research last year showed people feel women's sport is more authentic, it's more genuine, they have a closer affiliation to fans and spectators and fans with the athletes, etc. And also I think brands are looking for that community link, and I think especially coming out of COVID-19, people looking for something that is very genuine. So I think lots of the traits that women's sport has that perhaps men's sport doesn't have at a more affordable rate as well. I think there's opportunities for brands and organisations there too. So yeah, I think it's just that general hope. I'm obviously involved in lots of meetings and conversations with different sports and governing bodies and organisations that people are concerned that we will fall backwards after such an amazing 2019 with 11.8 million watching the Lionesses in the semi-final of the FIFA World Cup. So those kind of figures banded around, sponsorship, commercial contracts, the 100 coming on with with cricket. So lots of equality happening fast. We're hoping it's a pause rather than being taken a backward step. So hopefully a pause, and we'll come out perhaps in a stronger position.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the strength that we were at before COVID, because I would totally agree with you. I have the pleasure of living in Leicestershire near Loughborough, a place I know you know quite well. And the opportunities for me and my 13-year-old to go and see the Lightning franchises, the netball, the cricket, and the skill level is just incredible. I watched the England ladies cricket team recently at Loughborough training, and the skill level is just immense. I was so impressed.
And I guess that's the basis of all those years of investment. And now women, for years and years, you'd hear people, men, but being negative often about women's sport and the quality. I don't watch women's football because they'd be beaten by a bunch of 14-year-olds. The quality of women's sport was criticised. Well, that's because women have played as amateurs and hadn't had the chance to play for years and years. So now they are playing more, and now we've got these professional contracts in that really short time of 4 or 5 years. We're suddenly seeing the extraordinary skill and what a great spectacle it is to be watching women play those teams.
Yeah. So before COVID-19 hit, what do you think was your biggest achievement as the Women's Sports Trust? What do you think, what's the one thing that you're really proud of that was just wonderful?
Yeah, I guess a lot of what we do is bringing people together. So Joe, one of the co-founders of Joe Bostock, the co-founder of the Women's Sports Trust, talks about us being a provocative glue. So that bringing thinking and bringing people together and starting those conversations. So a lot of what we'll do is bring, you know, big corporates along with media, along with sporting organisations, and whether it's MPs and politicians, but getting people in the room to talk together and see what's happening. So we've got a campaign at the moment called Unlocked. We've got 41 fantastic up and coming female athletes and 41 activators, so people from media, business, sport, etc., and working together to help those young women to find their voice and through them raise profile for women's sport. So I think Unlocked is a lovely example of what we do in terms of, we're not necessarily the ones out there campaigning, but behind the scenes we're pulling all the right strings to get people in the right place talking and making change.
Yeah, I think I've seen some stuff from Andy Reid about being an activator, I think for Steph Reid potentially, and making that connection and seeing the type of stuff. I have to say, I love following you on social media, and the one tweet I really look forward to is your review of the sports papers on a Sunday, to say how many articles are about women's sport. And I think those types of things have really brought it home to me, how hard it must be to be a professional in those types of environments, because you just don't get the coverage.
And I think it needs, my thing is always that calling it out. I've got to be a bit careful where I sit, of not criticising too much the people that we're working with too, but I think, you know, that is part of a old enough and whatever. I don't worry quite so much to call those things out. But absolutely, it needs to be said, whether that's across digital or newspaper or, you know, radio, and people are getting better at it. Actually, even today I heard him talking about the England cricket team are hoping to be back and playing on the BBC today, and I said to my husband immediately, you see, they've gone straight back. England cricket, is that women's cricket or men's cricket? But we assume men's because they've stopped the women's for the minute. But but that should be the case. It should be the England men's cricket. So as I think you do it in a different filter. I listen for things differently, and you hear things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and my 3 daughters have changed my filters. I'll stand up and say it's taken me a while to get this. And my 13-year-old is so competitive. She adores tennis. She plays hockey. I play hockey with her. And that's a really interesting dynamic as well, when you not only are playing with your daughter, but you're playing with juniors and adults on the same pitch. It's really interesting, the interaction between the genders, and the way at the beginning of the season, the boys never passed to the girls and the girls never passed to the boys. But towards the end of the season, they've worked out what their strengths are, and actually they all add value to the final outcome. And I really love that dynamic, and I've really enjoyed seeing that happen. And I suppose that moves us on a little bit to, what are your predictions for the future of women's sport? How do you think COVID will affect it, but more importantly, you know, where can we be with women's sport in the next 5 years?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just literally on my lunchtime walk, had a conversation with Rebecca Myers from the Sunday Times exactly about that. Where will we get to in 5 years? And is it, you know, the ambitious goal and vision for equality? You know, let's be realistic. And I think you almost need to take the Premier League out of this, because it is many. You know, it's almost like a separate league that affects all sport, actually, not just women's. But I think definitely, you know, a better balance in terms of viewing opportunities, contract, professional leagues, and so on. And we're beginning to see that. So I think more of the same. And if you look at sports, Olympic sports, triathlon or tennis and gymnastics, there's never been an issue in terms of equality. Women have had the same funding, the same opportunity. You know, the skill levels they might not be as strong, but their skill and artistry and whatever is the same as the men. So I think getting those team sports that have been later to the game and deprived of opportunity for so long, getting them to the level of some of the men's sports would definitely be an ambition for the next 5 years. And then through that, access too. So, and that's some of the lovely stuff. As you know, my podcast, a little plug. Can I do a little plug?
Oh, absolutely.
So the Game Changers podcast, this last series and the next series, is sponsored by Barclays. And actually, if you look at what Barclays are doing with women's football, not just as the biggest women's sports sponsor for the FAWSL, but all they're doing to enable every schoolgirl to play football by 2024. So in schools, their school partnership. That's the game-changing bit, really, is the changing generational thing, where little boys in the playground think it's okay for little girls to play alongside them. They don't stick them in goal or tell them they can't play. So that's the bit that I think then changes girls' access and involvement in sport, which then changes attitudes to life generally. And I'm not just doing this because I love women's sport, it's the wider piece of how that then impacts girls' attitudes to what they can be in life, whatever they want to be in life.
Absolutely. And I think there's three things. Firstly, I love the word sport for development rather than sport development. And I think what you're talking about there is sport for development. Secondly, my daughter's shoes are wrecked. Will you stop her playing football at the playground? And thirdly, the game changers have been just stunning. So I'm so pleased that you've done that podcast, because those were keeping me sane on long drives home, I have to say. And some of your guests have just been absolutely fascinating. So that's been brilliant. I just want to sort of switch lenses a little bit and talk about the stuff that I do in operations and facilities, because our survey, we've just done 65,000 people. Really interestingly, 64% response from females. And what's worrying me is if we don't get back some of our facilities and sites and things like that, actually we're going to damage the female participation more than we're going to damage the male participation. So the work that you're doing with the Women's Sports Trust, how can organisations and operators, those people that are helping people do physical activity, maybe not just sport, what can we learn from that, and how can we use some of the principles that you've applied to what you've managed to achieve?
Yeah, I think we talked a bit earlier about that lens. I think it's just looking at things through that lens of equality and openness. And I think we're all a little bit prejudiced, or it's whatever we've been brought up to think and the way that we are. So I think it's taking a back step and thinking, and that's not just about gender, it's about all kinds of equality and inclusive diversity. But what does this mean to other people, and how is this going to impact other people? That's really interesting, isn't it, in terms of the responses you've had from women and the opportunities to play in leisure centres. And I don't know what the stats are in terms of usage of leisure centres across the country, not necessarily gyms, but from a leisure centre.
I think we don't really have the detail, unfortunately. What we have is predominantly around membership, and we certainly know that women are more represented in fitness memberships than men are. I suppose just anecdotally, I play sport and I tend to see more men in a sports hall or in a squash court than I see women. Whether that's correct and whether that's across the country, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's more about the sort of the group exercise, the swimming and the fitness is very much women.
I guess from a personal point of view, I spent 10 years of my life at Windsor Leisure Centre with children, 3 daughters like you, trampolining, netball, dancing, swimming, whatever, all kinds of activities. So yeah, I guess it's interesting.
It's fascinating. So we could talk for hours, but I think this has come to a nice natural conclusion without me having to stop you, which is always difficult in these moments. But so I'm going to say, Sue, that is really, really useful. But before I go, where can people go to look for more information? So,
thrown that at me, haven't you? It's womensporttrust.co.uk. I'm sure it is. I could Women's Sport Trust, yeah, exactly. Yeah, into that, and that's where you'll find the charity. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Sue, thank you so much for your time. Take care and enjoy your dog walks.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Cheers.